Let's welcome our guest, Mr. Paul Richards, and of course, good morning and welcome, sir. All right, we're not hearing you. You got to try turning on your. Not hearing you. So let's try again.
Good morning. Sorry about that. Good morning.
Very good. I'm hearing. Good and welcome. All right, so we just came out of an SOE. Before I go on, just remind us you are now ordinary Paul Richards or former senator. Just give us your backdrop.
Well, since the parliament was prorogued just before the general elections, of course, there are no senators that exist beyond those that have been sworn in by Her Excellency in Mrs. Pasabi Sessa's new administration. So there are no opposition, no independent senators currently sitting.
All right, great. And of course, All right, so a new installation. Prior to that, we did have an SOE, did not reap the anticipated results, but just an overview as to how it impacted our safety, if it did at all.
Well, I don't know that I'm the person to answer that. The police service has been saying that it had borne fruit. At that time, the former administration's Ministry of National Security was saying that it bore fruit. There are mixed views on that. The police had provided some data saying that murders had been down by a particular percentage, which escapes me now. But it was quite a protracted SOE. I think it started in December last year, if I'm not mistaken, and ran the whole course and ended a couple of weeks ago. So we'll see how it goes. The crime is something that's very on everybody's lips in Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, in the context of our inability to manage crime. Over the last, I dare say, 15, 20 years, it's been constantly rising, in particular the murder rate, which is the most obvious barometer by which people judge whether or not law enforcement and security services are really making headway in impacting crime.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that has been our most painful reality, the murders and, of course, unprecedented figures last year. And, of course, this year started out in the same fashion. All right, so we have a new government in place. The splitting of the Ministry of National Security is now Minister of Homeland Security and, of course, Minister of Defense. Given those two separate entities in the same ministry, how effective should that be, in your view?
First of all, may I take the opportunity to congratulate Mrs. Pasabi Sessa and her coalition partners on what is clearly a significant mandate by the people of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of their profound victory at the recent polls, and also the Tobago People's Party and Mr. Augustine and his colleagues. The splitting of the ministries, well, it is an interesting approach. It is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago. There are several jurisdictions that would have gone down the route of splitting internal security from external security. So I'm presuming, although we have not been given any definitive information, Homeland Security, I'm presuming, based on what I know of other jurisdictions, maybe internal security, the crime situation in the country, which is headed by, of course, Minister Alexander, and the defense portion of it, which I'm presuming would be border control, Coast Guard, etc., will fall to Minister Sturge. Well, even before Mrs. Pasabi Sessa won the election and the UNC and the coalition partners won the election, we had seen the previous government under Dr. Rowley introduce then Minister Keith Scotland in the ministry with then Minister Fitzgerald Hines. So while it may not have been split in terms of two official ministries, certainly the portfolios were split between two persons in that previous administration, which to me is not much different from what we see now, just that they're two different ministries, which speaks to the fact that maybe both administrations realize crime being one of the biggest issues facing Trinidad and Tobago, that one person overseeing such a vast ministry, which includes, if I'm not mistaken, the TTPS, the TT Defense Force, the Coast Guard, the Fire Services, and several other agencies, may need two persons. And this may bear fruit in terms of having somebody focus particularly on internal security, which is the crime situation, which is now Minister Alexander's portfolio. So we're hoping that this bears fruit. It will only benefit Trinidad and Tobago and the region at large, and every citizen, visitor, and investor in the country. So And Minister Alexander does have some experience, quite a bit of experience in law enforcement, being a former police officer at a high-ranking level. So we will see if he brings that to bear in terms of the overall strategies that are used in managing crime, reducing crime, preventing crime, and bringing criminals to justice.
They are very adamant that this stand your ground law will be implemented, thereby issuing firearms to law-abiding citizens. One critic said that if this is the way to approach crime fighting, it's just going to add to the numbers. Just give us your view as to whether this is the right approach in fighting crime, or one of the approaches. The right to bear arms, we know in varying parts in the United States, as you referred to, the portfolio that they have is similar to that in the States. Do you see this as an effective crime fighting tool, or is it at all? Or is it just a way to give protection to those, or giving those people an opportunity to protect themselves from home invasions?
Well, Mrs. Pasabi Sessa and the UNC have been steadfast in opposition in this position of granting licenses, firearm users licenses, to persons who are, I guess, qualified, who are eligible. And even though that is the position, I'm still presuming there will be a significant process in place and hopefully eligibility criteria, so that while I understand the fear and the terror that has been instilled in the population, particularly with the spate of home invasions in the past 2-3 years, that in many instances had targeted vulnerable groups like the elderly. We saw so many elderly people being held up. It is a move, if I understand it, in terms that Mrs. Pasabi says and her team had been advocating, similar to, I could stand corrected, I guess the right to bear arms. I don't think that's in our law, in our legal system, but certainly it seemed to me to be moving in the direction of granting licenses to people who were considered at risk. I don't know how far it will go. I don't know that arming every citizen is the intention or is going to redound to the benefit of less crime. But I'm hoping that stringent measures are put in place, even if that is the intention, to be able to grant more licenses to people who are deemed to be at risk or at higher risk than the rest of the population for whatever reason. We know the business community had been in many instances at higher risk, but I'm hoping that stringent eligibility criteria are put in place, and also stringent monitoring and supervision criteria, because we've seen in the past evidence brought to the Parliament that although there is a regime in place by the TTPS to monitor persons who have firearm users licenses and firearms, somewhere along the line, the issue of ammunition and the amount of ammunition persons had and the monitoring of that ammunition went awry, posing even greater danger. Even within some of our arms of the protective services, there were several instances where ammunition ended up on crime scenes, and ammunition ended up unaccounted for within legitimate law enforcement agencies and national security agencies. So it only adds or begs the question as to what mechanisms will be put in place, one, to ensure that persons who are at risk and eligible receive these firearms, and that the use of these firearms is monitored, and the ammunition associated with those is monitored in a really powerful regime that does not add to the problem, but helps to alleviate the problem and protect people, citizens, and investors and visitors alike.
Exactly, you made the point there about the legitimate, if we want to call us keepers of our safety, and rounds of ammunition, thousands were missing. How do we guarantee that the ordinary law or abiding citizen to conform with the regulation, should we say, put in place to ensure that this system is not abused? We know of in the past where officers would have allegedly rented out their weapons and so on. So the concern for ensuring that it does not go against us as opposed to going to work for us, how do we guarantee that, Mr. Paul Richards?
Well, this is by my understanding, the remit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and by extension, the policies of the Ministry of National Security, in this case, the Ministry of Homeland Security, and I guess by extension, the Ministry of Defense and the Minister Sturge. the issue of monitoring and evaluation and checks and balances is a critical issue in this new paradigm. If and when we go down the road of granting more firearm users licenses and access to firearms to persons who are at risk and who legitimately deserve to own and use firearms, because one, they've passed through the stringent eligibility criteria. Two, they've been trained properly, and there is regular training and updated training and assessment and monitoring of where these firearms are kept, how they are kept, the ammunition, etc. This, I'm presuming, will come from a policy document from the government through the both ministries and the relevant agencies, including or primarily the Ministry of Homeland Security, will be responsible for the policies that pass down to the TT Police Service. Presently, our Commissioner of Police, in our case now the Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Benjamin, will be overall responsible for those mechanisms. And we hope that they understand in this new paradigm, it is even going to be more incumbent upon them to do and exercise due diligence, monitoring, evaluation, to make sure that these firearms that will now be, I guess, more available to deserving citizens or eligible citizens are monitored so they don't end up in the hands of criminals, and also, which we've seen in other jurisdictions, don't end up in the hands of children inadvertently and persons who are not the licensed user. Because there are many cases we've seen in other jurisdictions where people are careless with firearms. We saw a situation where a firearm was left in a car, I think 2 years ago, by a licensed user, and it ended up, the person ended up injured as a result of that. So I think these safeguards, checks and balances are going to be critical moving forward to protect persons who are granted the option and the ability to have these firearms and ammunition associated with them.
Well, I'm very glad that you have brought this to the attention. Maybe in some cases we are so in a hurry to get rid of the crime that mechanisms are put in place that will, if not guarded properly or guided properly, we could be having a very unfortunate situation. Now, God, we hope that no unfortunate situation happens, and we just watch to see. All right, Mr. Alexander also spoke about motor vehicle number plates that would be monitored, or some effect technology that is going to bring into this country, and of course facial recognition cameras that can tell or detect a would-be criminal or criminal. I don't know what the technology is particularly dealing with. However, he spoke to these two, and we know in the States when you get pulled over, they run your license plate. If this license plate had any issue, they would pull you over and take away the vehicle and so on. Let's speak to those two, which I think is excellent, and how it can help in crime fighting in this country.
I think they're both excellent ideas. They're not new ideas. Jack Warner, then Minister Jack Warner, spoke about the RF license plates over almost about 15 years ago. When he was Minister of Works and Transport, he was very adamant about introducing the RF license plate system, because guess what? Criminals don't ride around in donkey carts or bicycles. They use cars to get around. And if there's a system in place, an effective, efficient system in place that has the ability to tag license plates electronically from receptors on, for example, light poles or cameras around the country, it is going to be much easier to tag a vehicle being used by criminals as it makes its way across the country. Because this is a small country where these are two small islands, and it's not difficult because our roadways are very limited. So if a criminal commits a crime, or when a criminal commits a crime, they're not going and trying to get away on foot. They are going to use a vehicle, and that idea, which Mr. Warner proffered many years ago, which unfortunately never came to reality, is an excellent idea once implemented properly. But we've had in the past implementation deficits in Trinidad and Tobago. The other issue of facial recognition is also not new and also an excellent idea. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the 12th Republican Parliament, laws were passed regarding traffic lights and facial recognition technology, if I'm not mistaken, which were never fully operationalized. So again, excellent idea, not effectively operationalized, zero results. So it will come down to one, the amendment to the laws regarding those situations, because I think there may be some privacy issues in some cases regarding the facial recognition system. But it has been implemented. If you go to the UK, you are within camera view in central London or in other parts of London thousands of times if you walk through London for 1 hour, and it is within their legal framework. So it's not novel law that can't be implemented in Trinidad and Tobago. It's all about understanding what will work here and implementing it effectively, monitoring its effectiveness, and making changes along the way to make sure the desired results are obtained. I think they're both excellent ideas.
So, along with the Homeland Security, should be an IT specialist who would ensure that these cameras are operational and monitored. Because half of the problem is, yes, the footage is available, but nobody's monitoring. You mentioned England there, and if you are in some areas and you're loitering or you're going wrong in circles and not going anywhere, the police will pick you up. Let's come to how we operationalize. There are cameras all over the country. However, they are just there as window dressing. The whole question of implementation. What, besides Alexander and Homeland Security and Defense, those specialists needs to be employed and to ensure that they execute their duties in monitoring and to know who and to collect data in some cases as to monitoring the vehicles that may be up to no good.
Well, I'm sure that each ministry, and this is a new administration, so we have to give them a chance to settle in to do audits to see what systems are in place, what infrastructure systems are in place, what software systems are in place, to know what they're working with, to know if they have to update the systems and the protocols that go with the system. So we have to give the new administration some time to settle in and to do those audits. I think the idea of IT departments in the TT Police Service, I'm sure, from my knowledge, there's an extensive IT and digital department in the TT Police Service already. Whether or not it's being used effectively, guided by policy, and monitored for its effectiveness may be another matter. As I said, the audits will take care of that to see if the systems are in place and the processes are in place to make sure that the desired results are coming out. We also have seen the introduction of a new ministry, or a part of a new ministry. I think Minister Dominic Smith is the Minister of Public Admin, I think, and Artificial Intelligence, which seems to have gone along the way of combining what would have been the former Ministry of Digital Transformation with the Ministry of Public Administration. So I'm presuming that there'll be a central ministry understanding or putting the infrastructure or decentralization in place for IT and technology in all the ministries. And then I'm really happy to see that the administration has taken on and championed the issue in a name, because that's very important. Because I brought this to the attention of the parliament many months ago, where in Australia, I do believe it is that I cited, there's a whole Ministry of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Transformation 10 years ago. So I'm happy to see that this administration has now put it on paper and put it in the name, to me, signaling that this is going to be something they're focused on intently. And while it is one ministry, I'm sure that ministry will have purview, like the former Ministry of Digital Transformation, in terms of making sure all the ministries are championing digital transformation and artificial intelligence, because it is what is happening now. We cannot close our eyes to it and remain 10 or 5 years behind the curve, playing catch up all the time, when the rest of the world is using these technologies to advance their democracies and advance their economies. So I think we have to, as I said, wait and see when they go in, what audit will take place, what systems are in place, in particular the TTPS, which I know is already heavily data driven, and how these technologies will add to crime fighting, law enforcement, and crime suppression in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. So let's now go to focus a little bit on Minister of Defense, Wayne Sturge, and his responsibility. There is a desire for patrol vessels on our sea coast, particularly Coast Guard vessels. The last administration boasts that they will have Coast Guard vessels returning efficiently. We know what happened in the past. This new administration will have the responsibility of ensuring that we do have the technology on the sea. Drones maybe in some cases to monitor where the vessels cannot go. Let's speak to the role of the Minister of Defense in that regard.
Well, Minister Sturge has a vast background in criminal law. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's a criminal defense attorney. So he has some understanding of law enforcement and the criminal arena in Trinidad and Tobago. The issue of our borders and the porosity of our borders has been a long-standing issue where the crime and the Trinidad and Tobago being a transshipment point for illegal drugs and guns has long been part of the reason why we have these high crime levels in Trinidad and Tobago. The issue of the legitimate ports and illegal guns and drugs coming through our legal ports has been a long-standing issue. So I'm presuming that the issue of border patrol and protection, whether or not we're using drones, look at the situation regarding Venezuelan illegal migrants. We all know, we've heard the stories about people going back and forth unchecked. We've all heard the stories about villages being set up in Citrus and other parts of the southeastern and southwestern peninsulas where it seems that these people are coming and going. It has been made public many years ago that when the economy in Venezuela started to crumble, not only law-abiding citizens would have been coming across to this country, criminals started coming across. We have information from the Ministry of National Security in the past year or two that gangs from Venezuela are operating in Trinidad and Tobago. So Minister Sturge's portfolio is going to be directly correlated or highly correlated to whether or not Minister Alexander can make inroads, because it's one thing to protect inside. If you're not protecting and monitoring and guarding your borders, and criminals can come in and out as they see fit, as they want. Illegal guns and drugs can pass through this country undetected, or even if they're detected, no one is brought to justice. We will continue to have the issue of rampant crime in Trinidad and Tobago. There's been a lot of information about the dark economy in Trinidad and Tobago and how much of our economy is underscored by the drug trade and the illegal gun trade, with these issues not being successfully addressed. So both ministries are critically important for Trinidad and Tobago's advancement moving forward, because we all know of the significant damage it's had in terms of the loss of human life, the damage to the economy, and our reputational damage internationally.
All right. Also, well, the return since the Latita inquiry, the Marine Patrol of the Police Service. Obviously, we do have a element of it in Tobago. However, that's to safeguard the Marine Park, but not effective as patrolling, fighting against crime, drug dealers crossing the borders, and so on. How efficient or how important it is to have an effective Marine branch in the TTPS in working in tandem with the Coast Guard going forward?
It's extremely effective, but let me add another dimension to our conversation. A lot of what we're discussing this morning hinges on the police service, the TPS, in both Trinidad and Tobago. And you can put all the systems in place, you can put all the protocols in place, you can put all the laws in place. We have a problem with corruption in our Trinidad and Tobago police service. It has been long documented, and as they say, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. If we do not make progress in rooting out and bringing to justice corrupt elements in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service or any other arm of national security, we will be spinning top in mud, to use a colloquialism, because those persons will be continuously undermining the intention and the efforts of their law-abiding colleagues. One of the first things Minister Alexander has to do is to put mechanisms in place to weed out corrupt police officers, and Minister Sturge in the other arms of the national security apparatus to weed out corrupt. We didn't mention prisons, Coast Guard, and City Defense Force, because if we do not weed out those corrupt elements, we will continue to have ineffective crime fighting strategies, because they will undermine the efforts, the plans, and the intentions of the authorities and the law-abiding colleagues that they work with, and put their lives in danger, actually.
Mr. Richards, how do you do that? Remember when Gary Griffith was there, his intention was to weed out the rogue element, and he called them by a particular name, and he was chastised for it. Lie detector apparatus was in place, and all of that, and it fell to zero. How do we rid the police service and any other security element to rid the rogue element out of the services? How do we do it? How do we get to doing that? That's
I
a
don't think
challenge.
it's impossible. New York City in the 80s and 90s was known to be one of the most corrupt police environments in the world. At one time in London, the Metropolitan Police were known to have extremely corrupt elements, and they are huge jurisdictions, and they were able to do it. Trinidad and Tobago is a small country. If we want to do it, if we really want to do it, and if we're not coddling sacred cows, because I've often said the persons who are involved to a large extent in corrupt elements or corrupt activities in the TTPS are not necessarily low ranking, just coming officers. But someone has to have the testicular fortitude to go after anyone, and I mean anyone, who's corrupt in the TTPS or any of the other arms of national security in Trinidad and Tobago. It is not impossible. You just have to have the will and the effort to do it, and to do it consistently, because you can't do it today and stop next month. It has to be a consistent effort and mechanisms in place to identify and bring to justice those elements. And by doing that, you set an example in the national security agencies that if you involve yourself in criminal activities and corrupt the services, you will be found out and you'll be brought to justice. So there's going to be a less likelihood of persons in engaging in that sort of activity. But
Very.
if you could do it and know that you'll get away, where's the big deal? Like getting away?
Exactly. All right, let's come to another element that contributes, as a matter of fact, is the most frightening of them all. Those are the gangs that are, in some cases, supported by elements of the police, quote unquote, where you have police running a block kind of thing. And they are given all the necessary supporting elements to protect their blocks and their gangs and so on. Gangs, I mean, there was an attempt to outlaw gangs. You were in the Senate, and that fell down. What should be the
You know it
approach?
fell down. I
Pardon me?
would say there was an attempt to outlaw gangs. Gangs are against the law. Being in a gang is against the law in Trinidad and Tobago on the statute book. So I don't
Right.
know.
How do we, well, the point I'm making is, how do we enforce and how do we identify what is a gang? I think that's the challenge. Because if you and I and the two other fellas liming at this spot on a regular basis every Friday to drink some beers, that could be deemed a gang. How do we identify the gangs? But just speak to it, because what I want is our overall detecting of the gangs and eradication of the gangs, because they still exist.
You, I, and your producer liming on a block, having some beers, not engaged in any criminal activity, not planning any criminal activity, not associating with any criminals, cannot be deemed a gang. That is not what the law states.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing here, but the law states two or more persons gathered to engage in criminal conduct or engaging in criminal conduct or participating in criminal conduct is what the law states a gang is. So persons just liming on the block, socializing, cannot be deemed a gang in our laws in Trinidad and Tobago. So let's start with that. The police service has on many occasions, and also the intelligence agencies, have identified over the years the number of gangs, the names of gangs, the gang members, the gang leaders. We see in many instances in the news after someone is shot, he was known to be a member of a gang, but he's outside the day. There are some legal barriers or challenges that have been identified in terms of when persons are picked up and known to be members of gangs, getting bail and going back out and continuing to commit crimes. All these things are elements in the mosaic of dealing with gangs effectively. There's always intelligence. The challenge has been not only gathering the intelligence and identifying the main players in gangs, the gang leaders, the gang participants, who in some instances are as young as 14 and 13 years old, as been told to us by the TTPS, but gathering the evidence, the prosecutable evidence, to take these persons to court and lock them up, put them behind bars. And then we have the situation now, when you put them behind bars, of the prisons and persons continuing to have access to cell phones and other communication devices and continuing to engage in gang activity even behind prison walls. So it's a complex situation, but it comes down to the effectiveness of law enforcement in gathering the evidence to secure prosecutions for persons who are identified and charged with gang activity.
All right. We have presently, England recently imposed visa restriction as a result of individuals going to England and the States seeking asylum. the Prime Minister then rebutted and, in fact, responded that they should contact this country to find out who these individuals are that are seeking asylum. And we know that it doesn't work that way. But there's that reality that criminals are leaving this country, going to another country, posing as decent citizens. And there's no, well, after that, that's it. We don't hear from them or see them anymore. That escape from the judicial system, how can we have, from an international standpoint, you go to seek asylum, we do find out from you who you find out from your country, why you're here seeking asylum, who are you, and then the necessarily maybe deportation and so on. Just bring that into perspective. Shouldn't that be implemented in the Ministry of National Security, in whether it's Home Defense? Just speak to it from that standpoint.
Well, let's re-engineer, if I may, answer the question by re-engineering the problem. Where are the persons coming from? Where are these alleged gang members and criminals coming from? Where's their point of origin? And why are they not being apprehended, charged at the point of origin? How can someone who is a known gang member, gang leader, person involved in crime, leave Trinidad and Tobago and reach the United Kingdom without our authorities knowing, to the point where they're claiming asylum for being their lives in danger and whatever else they're claiming asylum for? And so causing the UK authorities to say, well, you know what, this problem has exacerbated to the point where it's putting strain on our resources, and now we're putting these systems in place. For the first time in my lifetime, we now have to apply for a visa to the UK, pay for a visa. And if my memory doesn't serve me correct, there was a warning about this about 2.5 years ago, that it may have been a rumor, but it has certainly come to pass. So we have to ask ourselves, as we mentioned a couple of minutes ago in our conversation, how much our systems failing in Trinidad and Tobago to identify, gather evidence, and bring criminals to justice is now affecting our international reputation and the ability of ordinary citizens to function regionally and internationally. You can't blame the UK authorities for taking the steps to protect their citizens and their country. That is their responsibility. And it must have reached quite a dire state. If I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me correct, it's over 600 or 700 persons would have sought asylum over a particular time period. When the authorities in the UK are monitoring this, and it's increasing and increasing, and the point of origin, Trinidad and Tobago, doesn't seem to be effective in dealing with it or managing it, they have to take the necessary steps. They did the responsible thing on behalf of their citizens and their country. What are we doing to stymie the supply side? That is the question we should be asking. Why did it get to that point where it became a problem in the UK for the UK to put these systems in place? And then we want to cry over spilt milk after that. We had a responsibility to deal with them here, but we didn't do that. We failed in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Paul Richards, it was indeed a pleasure having this conversation with you. Looking forward to having you in the Senate again. Should you be recalled, I'm sure you're available, yes? Yes?
7:36. It's been a wonderful conversation with you this morning.
All right, thank you, my brother. All the best to you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I used to admire you. I used to be one of your fans when you were doing what I do now.
You used to admire me. If you don't admire me anymore. Broadcasting is, in most cases, a noble profession. Keep up the great work, and to you and your team. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you, my brother.